Hi, in this video we're going to be looking at unemployment. In the last video we looked at factors that influence employment levels, but this time we're going to look more specifically at unemployment. More specifically, we're going to be looking at the main types of unemployment. But before we do that, we need to cover some key terms. Those terms that we'll be going through are labor force, employment, and unemployment. Then we're going to look at the main types of unemployment, so seasonal, frictional, structural, and cyclical, with examples being provided for each of these. Our first objective, which is defining key terms. Labor force is a term that you should be familiar with. It refers to all people who are able to work in a country or in an area. The labor force includes everyone who is employed, because remember, employment is a condition in which a person is paid for the work that they do. And if you're being paid for work, it means that you are able to work. But the labor force also includes people who are unemployed, because unemployed people are those who are both willing and able to work but who simply cannot find a job. Both people who are employed and people who are unemployed are part of the labor force. So another way that you can put the definition for labor force is the sum of persons in employment plus those in unemployment. Now that we have gotten those key definitions out of the way, we're going to be looking at types of unemployment. There are several types of unemployment that you would find, or several categories of unemployment that you would find online, but four of the main types are seasonal unemployment, frictional unemployment, structural unemployment, and technical or technological unemployment is a very major type of structural unemployment. And the final one is cyclical unemployment. We're going to be looking at these in a little more depth. Firstly, we'll look at seasonal unemployment. This type of unemployment arises due to seasonal patterns in consumer demand in various markets. Consumer demand, that is the level of want or need for a particular commodity or good or service, that varies or changes depending on the time of year, depending on what season it is, depending on many things. And so sometimes unemployment can arise if the good or the service being provided is based on fluctuations or changes or variations in consumer demand over time. During those times when consumer demand is higher, production levels will be higher. And when production levels are higher, that means that there is a greater demand for labor, because companies will need more people on staff to fulfill the needs and the wants of the people who are paying for the products and services. Inversely, if there is a lower consumer demand, then there will be lower production levels, and so the demand for labor would be lower. If people are not demanding the product or service, then the company does not need to produce as much or as many, and so they may lay off workers in order to keep their costs in line with their profits. We see examples of this in the agricultural industry. Let's say that this is a plot of land that's owned by a farmer and he uses it to cultivate food for sale. On a regular day, this farmer may have 5 farmhands to look after the field for its daily and weekly and monthly needs for planting and pruning and watering and so on. However, during times of harvest, it would not be easy for these 5 people to pick or to collect all of the fruit or all of the crop before it spoils. Harvest time is a very small window, and so in order to avoid losses due to crops spoiling because they stay on the plant or the tree, he may hire more workers. So while it may be a big task for these 5 men, these 5 people, to harvest this entire plot of land, if we add some more, then the job looks like it will be easier because there are more hands available. So in this way, The demand for labor in the agricultural industry is higher during times of harvest, but lower during other periods of the year. Another industry that we see this in is the tourist industry. In times when tourist arrivals are high, when the tourist season is in full swing, hotels hire more employees. More rooms need to be cleaned, more tables need to be waited, more food needs to be prepared because there are more people staying at the properties. And in the Caribbean, this happens a lot during Christmas time in some instances. So these would be peak times for tourist arrivals. However, when arrivals are lower, the hotels and the inns don't need as many employees, so they reduce on their staff. So that would cause people during those off seasons when tourists are not occupying the hotels, those extra staff that are let go will become unemployed. The second type that we're going to see is frictional unemployment. Frictional unemployment can occur for many different reasons. It is a short-term unemployment, meaning that it does not exist for a very long time. Frictional unemployment occurs or is caused when individuals enter the labor market for the first time after completing school. It normally takes graduates a few months after leaving school before they can get a job. During that time between leaving school and starting their job, they are frictionally unemployed. It can also be caused when individuals need to search for some time before finding a satisfactory job. Another way that frictional unemployment that can occur is when individuals change jobs until they're unemployed for some time as they wait to start the next job. This person plans to end their job on December 28th and start a new job on January 29th. So in the month or so that this person is between jobs, they are going to be considered frictionally unemployed. And finally, there could be a case where people are just unaware of vacancies that exist and so they don't apply for them. The next type of unemployment that we're going to see is structural unemployment. Structural unemployment occurs when economic growth leads to a change in the main sector in the country. In other words, those sectors or those economic activities that created the most money or revenue for the country changes. This happened in many Caribbean countries, especially in the OECS, because to the early 2000s, many Caribbean countries were dependent on agriculture as the main source of income. As a result, most people in the country were employed in the agricultural field. Here we have a pie chart of a country in the Caribbean, and you can see that agriculture contributes 64% of income to the country. However, many Caribbean countries saw a change going into 2010 as tourism and hospitality began to emerge as a source of more income for the country. So many people who were previously employed in agriculture had to put down their trowels and their shovels and take on jobs or roles involved in the tourist industry. Now, structural unemployment occurs when people who were employed in the previous industry find it hard to get a job in the newly booming industry. Because a change in the structure of the economy, change in the main sectors that contribute to the economy, people become unemployed. And it stands to reason that the sectors that bring the most money into the country are those that would also provide the most employment opportunities for citizens of the country. Now, why would these people who are in the middle of two different industries become unemployed due to the change? For one, they may lack skills for the new industry because the two industries may be worlds apart or there may be very little overlap in the skills needed for them. Another reason is that the new industry cannot absorb all the labor from the previous industry. If there was a case where in industry A, 50 workers were needed to complete a job, but in the new industry B, 10 workers were needed to complete those jobs, then 40 people will be out of work because of that change in the structure in the economy. So in this case, if citizens of the country were to only keep the skills that they have from agriculture in the Caribbean, in the midst of an economy that thrives on tourism and that provides jobs mainly in the tourist industry, this person, if they continue lacking the skills for the tourism industry, may become unemployed because they are not able to be transferred from the agricultural industry that we had in the Caribbean into the tourism industry, which now provides the most revenue. This is one example of how structural unemployment has occurred in the Caribbean, and in many cases, scholars and analysts believe that structural unemployment is one of the main types of unemployment that we have seen in the Caribbean in the past decade or so. Still under structural employment, we're going to look specifically at technical, or you may see it called technological unemployment. Technological unemployment occurs when technology is introduced to an industry and thus it takes the place of human labor. So, we'll look at agriculture once again. Before, human labor was being used to clear the land, to prepare the soil for planting, to water plants, and even to harvest the plants in many instances. However, there is a case where people have been replaced by machines that are able to prepare the land, that are able to water the plants, and that are able to even harvest the crops in some cases. If workers are unable to learn new skills to adjust, for example, using that new machinery or even fixing that new machinery, the workers will be unemployed because they now have no skills that they can offer to employers in the field since their job has been taken up by machinery or equipment. Fourthly and finally, we'll look at cyclical unemployment. This type of unemployment comes about with natural changes in the economic cycle. Now this here is a diagram, a very basic diagram of the economic cycle. Naturally, economic activity has times when it peaks as spending and economic activity grow, and times when it falls and the country or the economy experience a trough, which is what you see at the bottom. During those times when GDP, that's gross domestic product, increases, we refer to that as economic growth or economic expansion. During those times when GDP falls and economic activity is on a decline, we refer to that as a recession. In those periods of economic growth or expansion, consumer demand increases and so consumer spending increases, and that creates a higher demand for labor. As people spend money, companies realize that more goods need to be manufactured in order to keep up with the demand for the goods, and in order to keep up with that demand, they're going to advertise vacancies and employ more people. However, the opposite also happens. During periods of recession or decline, consumer demand and consumer spending fall, and that therefore reduces the need for large amounts of labor. When people do not have money to spend, companies or business owners earn less in profits. Then they may even fire employees because they are not able to afford to keep them on, and they will definitely not be hiring anyone new. Cyclical unemployment should not be confused with seasonal unemployment because cyclical unemployment happens naturally with the economic cycle, but seasonal unemployment specifically has to do with the time of year. There are times of year where more labor is needed and times when less labor is needed. That's predictable or more predictable. With the economic cycle, those periods of growth and recession are a bit less predictable, and so businesses can only adapt as the economic climate changes. They cannot predict how many employees they're going to need in January of 2021 compared to January of 2027 because they don't know what's going to happen with the economy. Whereas hotels know that they will need more staff during the tourist season and fewer staff during the off season. So don't confuse cyclical and seasonal unemployment. Let's do a quick recap of what we saw. For one, the labor force includes all people who can work in the country. Everyone who is willing and able to work is part of the labor force. So that means that unemployed people are part of the labor force, though they do not have a job. But because they can work and they are seeking work, they are considered part of the labor force. And we also saw that unemployment can occur for many different reasons. But the main reasons that we saw in this video were the seasonal nature of some jobs, because some jobs are required at some times and not required at others. The timing or the spacing between jobs, because people are between jobs all the time. Changes in the structure of the economy, and that includes improvements in technology, and natural changes in the demand for goods and services. I hope this was helpful, and thank you for watching.